This video will be concerned with industrial action. Industrial action is a result of unresolved conflict within the workplace. It's a situation where there is a grievance or there is an issue, and the issue is causing bad will between management and workers, and this could lead to industrial action. And as we'll see later in these slides, industrial action may take different forms. Employees who are associated with a trade union have the right to collectively organise industrial action, providing the process is supervised by a union and representatives. So trade unions have the right to collectively organise industrial action. If it's not done through the trade union, then it's unofficial, and we'll talk about this in a few slides' time. But it's unofficial, and it may be illegal. So industrial action must take place within a legal framework, and it must be structured and organised according to that framework. Industrial action involves measures used to restrict or reduce productivity within a workplace. And these measures take place through the support of trade unions. So essentially, industrial action is aimed at reducing productivity, reducing output of the organisation, and in that way hurting the organisation. The organisation will have less revenue because it will have less products to sell. But it may also lose market share, or its reputation in the marketplace may be damaged. So management try to avoid industrial action. They try to accommodate the requirements of the workers and of the unions, if possible. But of course, the workers who go on strike, for example, they will also be hurt. They will not have wages in the period in which they're away from work. So in a sense, there is pressure on two sides, management and the unions, to try to avoid major industrial action. Having said that, we know it does happen, and there are different types of industrial action that may take place. But the point here, number 3, is that the point of industrial action is to try to damage or restrict productivity of the organisation, and in that way bring pressure to bear on the organisation to accommodate the requirements of the workers. Industrial action can take many forms, but are mainly characterised as follows. Constitutional action and its opposite, unconstitutional action. Official action and its opposite, unofficial action. Organised action and, would you believe, its opposite, unorganised action. So let's have a look at these and see what's meant by them. Constitutional action, well, this it takes place when all processes of dispute procedures have been unsuccessful. So if the two sides, management and workers, try to negotiate and they explore all the possibilities and still a problem remains between them, then if the trade union decides to take industrial action, that would be constitutional, because they have tried everything to resolve it before they took the industrial action. If they've tried every avenue and failed, tried to fix the problem, but it couldn't be fixed, then the action that follows on will be constitutional. There's nowhere else to go. There's nothing else that can be done. All of the various negotiations and all of the consultative processes have been undertaken and have failed. The only way forward is industrial action, and that's seen as constitutional. Unconstitutional action takes place during the negotiations process. taking industrial action during the bargaining process can have a negative effect on the outcome of decisions. Unconstitutional means they are preempting the negotiations. They're jumping in too fast. The negotiations is in progress, and let's say the union calls the strike. Well, that's unconstitutional. The negotiations were still occurring, so the strike should not have taken place. Likewise, if the negotiations are in progress, management should recognise this also and act appropriately. They should not create a climate or an environment within which the unions feel they must take industrial action. So action taking place during negotiations is not constitutional, it's unconstitutional. There's also something called stonewalling tactics. This is just wasting time, deliberately delaying the decision making, and both sides may be guilty of this. The unions may stonewall because they don't want a result straight away, they want to string it out and perhaps make the management look like they were the bad characters. They were the ones who did not negotiate or did not agree. They're trying to hold the negotiations up to try to win the argument, win it through frustration. But it could be the management do it as well. Management may deliberately hold up the negotiations and put off meetings and put back meetings, and they're trying to frustrate the whole process as well. This is known as stonewalling. It's a tactic used by both sides. Official action. Well, this form of action takes place with trade union support and authority. Industrial action only takes effect once collective agreements takes place. For example, balloting. So there is an agreement that a ballot must take place. It's a legal requirement as well in the UK. So they have the ballot and they then take action. That's official action. It's done according to the rules. It's appropriate. By contrast, unofficial action is initiated by employees to communicate dissatisfaction. This form of action is not supervised or not approved by trade unions. It's unofficial. It's taken normally within a very short time scale, and it could be done even ad hoc. It's just a walkout, perhaps. The workers don't like something that's happening and they don't want to cooperate with the management, and perhaps they walk out from work. They leave their place of work. That would be unofficial action. It's not structured, it's not approved. Organised action, well, this activity using the support of representatives and trade unions. The aim of organised action is to encourage positive change. So in this case, organised action, the trade unions are involved, it's structured, it's organised, there is a process to the action. It's organised with events, perhaps with a march or with picketing or something that indicates that the union is involved and the union approved the action. It occurs after all of the other processes have been undertaken and perhaps have failed. Unorganised action activities are activities conducted by individuals or groups of employees. Action taken has an impact on productivity. For example, absenteeism and even sabotage. We'll talk about this again in a moment. But unorganised action is simply action taken by individuals, action taken which is not approved by the trade unions or the trade union. It's not approved by management, clearly, but it's action that the workers feel that they want to make a demonstration over some aspect of change or something that's happened within the workplace, and they want to register their discontent. They do it normally quite fast. It could be what's known as a lightning strike. It just occurs very fast. There is no time for any process to take place. It's unorganized. There's no structure to it, and it's not approved by the trade unions. It could be manifest in the form of absenteeism, unorganized action, when workers simply stay away from work. And again, it impacts on the productivity of the business. It reduces the output of the business, and hence reduces the revenue stream to the business, but also possibly ruins the reputation of the business in the marketplace. Now, the types of industrial action. Well, there are different types of industrial action available to employees and employers. Employers may take action against the trade unions as well, but we're going to focus on the employees, and we're going to focus in entirely on those. So in fact, we're going to look at different types of industrial action that are possible, mostly from the perspective of the workers. So you'll see the title has just changed to industrial actions that are possible. And these could be, for example, strikes, withdrawal of cooperation. The workers may not cooperate with the management. They may not follow instructions precisely, or they may object to the instructions, or they may lead to inefficient procedures, like, for example, asking the management to explain in detail and perhaps put the instructions in writing, or they're just deliberately slowing the process down. It could be what's known as a work to rule or a go slow. A work to rule means the workers will do exactly as per their contract, nothing more. They will not show any goodwill or any flexibility. They will simply do what the contract states, and they will not accommodate anything else. Or they may work slowly. They may work, but perhaps not put a lot of effort in, so they're not meeting targets, and the whole production process has to be slowed down. Or it could be an overtime ban. They refuse to work overtime. For example, when the company has a surge in demand, perhaps a seasonal surge due to, let's say, Christmas sales or times like this, or for whatever reason, a very successful marketing campaign by the business has led to a large expansion in sales, a large increase in sales. And during those times, the company might want to increase work. They might want to have overtime working to try and make extra items for sale to meet the extra demand. But the workers may have an overtime ban because they're in dispute with the management over some issue. Or it could be picketing. Picketing is when the workers try to stop the company having contact with distribution channels or with suppliers of raw materials or components, when they try to disrupt the business by stopping outside agencies contacting the business, entering the business or leaving the business. They try to persuade them to not to cooperate with the business. Unorganized industrial action could be absenteeism or pilfering, stealing from the business. It's not legal and it's not to be condoned. It's downright immoral, but it can happen. Particularly, sometimes workers may take key components. For example, take a small part of a machine, which will mean that the machine can't be used until that particular part is returned. Now that's disruption. It holds up the production process, and it means the machine can only be used by that operator. And that's also a form of sabotage, a form of breaking the productive capacity of the organization. So this idea of pilfering, stealing, it may not be stealing in the true sense of the word. They may not be stealing for their own gain, direct gain, but they may be stealing a component with the intention of returning it later, but in the meantime it stops the machine from working. That's possible. So strikes. Well, a strike is an industrial action commonly used as a stoppage to labour. So a strike is an industrial action. It's the most popular type of industrial action. It's one which gets the headlines in the newspapers most frequently. It's often a short-term measure and used to raise a grievance or demand with the opposing party. So sometimes the workers may feel that the management is not listening to them or not paying attention to their requirements, and the only way to bring about a tension and bring about a process of negotiations is to have a strike. It demonstrates the seriousness of the situation. So a strike is a withdrawal of their labour so that the company can't function. The company in effect has to close down. Strikes in the UK are only legal if they are conducted by a representative or trade union. So in the UK they have to be organised through some sort of agency that's approved, for example a trade union. They can't just happen. If the union calls out the workforce on strike without going through a process of balloting the workers and so on, then that's illegal. And these reforms were put in place because the government or past governments felt that it was too easy for workers to go on strike and to damage companies. So it was felt that there should be a process, a balloting process, to make sure that a small minority of, let's say, the trade union could not cause major disruption. And perhaps a lot of people in the trade union may not want to go on strike. So a strike may be called, but in fact the strike is not supported universally or widely by the membership. So it's important to have a ballot to see exactly who supports the strike. Legally organised strikes are temporary and employees are expected to return to work. So when a strike occurs, it's normally anticipated it will only be for a short period of time, and then at the end of that period of time the employees will be expected to go back to work. The strike is over. So the company can get back to normal. Strategic stoppage is another form of strike. This involves a small group of skilled workers collectively organising a strike. So sometimes big organisations can be closed by a small number of workers. If a small number of key workers go on strike, then the whole company might have to close. Now that would be a strategic stoppage. That small number of workers know their power and are able to gain concessions by virtue of that power. Employees that organise strikes without trade union support risk losing their jobs. If they organise a strike without trade union support, it's illegal as well, but they could lose their jobs. So there are punishments for people who just organise the strike without going through due process. Withdrawal of cooperation. Well, this type of industrial action limits employee cooperation and flexibility to contractual agreements. So the workers are not cooperating fully with the management. They are simply sticking to what their contract states. They're only doing what the contract states. They're not showing flexibility. They're not trying to help the management in any way that is outside of their contract. So they are not cooperating. Now, to gain their cooperation, they may need extra inducements, and they may have grievances that need to be resolved and issues that need to be resolved before they will start to work properly again. But in the meantime, whilst those grievances are outstanding, they withdraw their cooperation. They work exactly to their contracts. Employees only work to agreed contractual terms and refuse any additional overtime or flexibility. They work exactly to what their contract states. No more, no less. So there's no flexibility, there's no overtime working, and the only way to win their cooperation is by conceding some issues or resolving some issues that are causing problems. Most organizations rely on staff cooperation and flexibility on a day-to-day basis. It's generally the case that organizations need staff to be flexible and to undertake new tasks and to perhaps work longer sometimes because of extra demand or whatever it is. So organizations require flexibility. But as I said, this may mean that the organization itself, the management, may have to concede some extra benefits to the workers or concede some issue that's outstanding between the workers and the management. Teachers and teaching unions have succeeded with this type of action. It happens from time to time, and sometimes key unions can use this type of action. For example, teachers might agree to just teaching the students and nothing else, no administration, for example, or no additional work within the institution. A teaching job requires teachers to be flexible and cooperative. Management will struggle to achieve objectives if staff limit their work activity. So management within schools and colleges require tutors and teachers to be flexible, to undertake extra duties, for example, admissions and activities for the students, and so there are many other tasks, not just a task of teaching. There are tasks, other tasks, but these may not be written into the contract, and therefore when there's an issue between the staff and the management, there may be a withdrawal of cooperation, and the workers, in this case the teachers or the tutors, will revert to working to their contracts only. Now, working to rule or go slow. Well, industrial action where employees only work to minimum requirements stated in the job specification. So they look at their contract and see what must they do, and they just do that. They don't do any more. They don't show any flexibility. They don't go any extra. They just do what's required, no more. They may adopt a go slow. Employees work slow and produce low levels of output. It's very difficult for management to try and get the workers to step up production. Workers may find all sorts of excuses to go slow. They may talk about poor quality raw materials or poor quality in terms of the machinery, or they may slow down the machinery or whatever. Workers are very innovative. They understand the job intimately and are able to slow down the work process if required. And the job of management becomes extremely difficult under those conditions. These tactics are very common in manufacturing plants, employees receive minimum pay regardless of output. So it really hurts the management. It doesn't hurt the employees so much. The employees still get paid. They're still at work for those hours, and they have a legal right to that pay. They're paid per hour. So they will still be paid, and paid the same amount, except they're not producing as much. And they're not showing any flexibility or any cooperation with management. It could be a ban on overtime, restricting any overtime work in order to reduce productivity. As I said earlier, it may be that the company experiences a surge in demand for its product, perhaps at different times of the year, or as a consequence, I should say, of a very successful marketing campaign, or whatever. So something leads to a surge in demand. But the workers may refuse to work more, to refuse overtime work, until they receive some concessions from the management. A refusal to work beyond contracted hours, that's what's meant by a ban on overtime. They will only work the contracted hours. If the contracted hours are 40 hours a week or 37.5 hours a week or whatever it is, they will work that and no more. And to get them to work more means the management must concede some point. Perhaps an outstanding issue, something that they couldn't agree on in the past, or perhaps the workers will require extra remuneration at double time or 1.5 times their salary, or whatever it is. The ban on overtime action is common in organisations where pay is low and there is a heavy reliance on overtime work. So if the organisation perhaps do not employ the right number of workers in the first place, that means they rely heavily on the existing workers working overtime, then this type of action is particularly successful in that situation, because the workers will refuse to work over, and that means the organisation will be hurt. Refusal to work overtime can have a major impact on organisations which depend on overtime working. So it can be a very successful strategy on the part of the workers to bring about concessions from the management. Picketing. Well, industrial action which includes employees making a stand on workplace premises. Picketing normally happens just outside the main entrance to the building, or the entrance that's used by delivery, or goods inwards or goods outwards. And the idea of picketing is to try and persuade drivers peacefully not to cross the picket line, to try to persuade workers who perhaps did not go on strike, to try to persuade them to not go to work. Workers may occupy a workplace as a stand for protest. This normally occurs during disagreements or grievances. So it could be the workers occupy the workplace. They could have a lock-in. They could lock themselves into a building and refuse to come out, perhaps. And that would be a protest. They're closing off the building, and they're also getting the company a lot of bad publicity, which will damage the company's reputation, their image, will damage their sales even. Picketing is common in circumstances where redundancies and job security are a threat. When a company is thinking about making redundancies, cutting back on the workforce because perhaps their sales are badly affected, or their revenue has fallen, or whatever, they're thinking of making redundancies. Sometimes this provokes the workers into trying and protect their jobs. They go on strike. But of course, in going on strike and in picketing, they're going to damage the company. Well, if the company's already weakened because of a fall in sales, this will just make the situation worse. But it often happens for that reason. Absenteeism. Well, absenteeism is an unorganized form of industrial action. This tends to be short-term and less extreme than quitting employment. Absenteeism simply means the workers don't go to work. They stay away. Perhaps they try to persuade medical authorities that they're ill and they don't want to go to work. Or they just simply stay away from work and try to hurt the company by their absence, because output is affected, the company is disrupted. And if enough of them do it, it's a very serious situation. Employees take the day off as protest for indicating disagreements. So they simply take a day off. They may do it, they may be coordinated. It may be a large number of the workers simply take the day off. They don't go in on a certain day. In which case the company has lost the output for that day. So it's quite a severe type of action to take. It's common when employees lack the support from trade unions. If the trade union thinks that the workers do not have a good case, so the trade union do not adopt what the workers want, they think the workers are looking for something perhaps that's unreasonable, then the workers may take it into their own hands to have a campaign of staying away from work. So it's quite extreme, but it's not official. It's not organised. It doesn't fall within the umbrella of the trade union involvement. I mentioned pilfering earlier. It's a form of theft. It's stealing from the organisation to express dissatisfaction. It's not that common in the literature, but it does get mentioned from time to time, so it's worth mentioning here. Theft is an illegal action and can have consequences such as dismissal and even imprisonment, because it is illegal. Pilfering is seen as cheating the employer and can be an act organised by a group of employees. It's immoral, it's wrong, it's illegal. Pilfering, it's not the true sense of the word, can happen in the sense that, as I mentioned earlier, workers may deliberately sabotage machines. And sabotage is the next topic we're going to talk about. But they may sabotage them and in a sense steal a part of the machine, steal a component which renders the machine useless, and that will damage production. Now, it's not pilfering, it's not stealing in the true sense of the word, but they are disrupting the organisation by taking the part. They may take the part back later. They may not. They may require the management to try and find a new part. Pilfering in the sense of stealing for perhaps to sell perhaps semi-precious metals or something of that nature. This is illegal, it's wrong, it's immoral, but it can happen. And it could be the result of a grievance with the management. They don't like the management. Or it could be just simply that they are bad people who want to steal, and there's no excuse for it. Sabotage, as I mentioned earlier. Sabotage is the disruption of organisational goals and objectives. It doesn't have to be that they stop production. You could simply sabotage the routines of the business. They can work in ways which are not compatible with the direction in which the management want them to work. They may be disruptive in the sense of they're putting effort in where management would prefer them to put that same effort in elsewhere. It's a form of sabotage. They're going against the wishes of the management. It can take many forms. For example, vandalism, that's an extreme one where there's downright damage to machines. That is sabotage, where the machine is vandalized and rendered useless as a consequence. So the company will have to buy a new machine. Well, that just risks the company. It risks the livelihoods of the workers. So there's absolutely no excuse for that type of behaviour. It could be damage to property or machinery, just general damage to it. Sabotage in the sense that they set about breaking the machine or damaging the machine or slowing it down. Or it could be the sabotage particular parts of the business. It doesn't have to be a machine. It could be other parts of the business that could be sabotaged or damaged. Or it could be simply failure to send important messages, that the communication system within the business is sabotaged. Communications within a business is very important. And it could be that misinformation is sent, which will sabotage the business and the workflow of the business. Wrong or bad information is sent to managers, and it could cause the business to go in the wrong direction. So again, because of sabotage. This form of action is witnessed by low-level skilled workers who do not have union support. Generally speaking, it doesn't happen amongst senior staff. It happens amongst perhaps low-level workers who are not organised within a union. They become frustrated or annoyed with the organisation for whatever reason. They're perhaps unhappy about their pay or their remuneration. They're unhappy about their working conditions or whatever it is, and they lash out. They sabotage the business and vent their anger in that way. So these are some of the issues that we need to consider when we think about industrial action. We've looked at quite a few of them here. It's worth going back, making your own notes, and understanding what each of the terms mean and what are its implications. But that's all I'm going to deal with at this time, so let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.